have had that right for 50 years. And Retake Our Democracy is here to tell you what's going on and what you can do about it. Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute weekly radio show that airs at 8:30 a.m. on KSFR 101.1 FM, 8:30 a.m. on Saturdays. And Santa Fe public radio station KSFR can also be heard by streaming from ksfr.org. That streams live. Next week, by the way, is Pledge Week. So I'm still not sure whether we'll be live from the studio. I know I won't be in the studio, but whether I'll be on live or not, and I should know that soon. We'll be putting something up on our blog to let you know about that. So our guests this morning are Elaine Sullivan. She's the board president for the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity, and Melissa Pickett. She's the Alliance's outreach coordinator. For some time, the major initiative of the Alliance has been to establish a state public bank. Before that, they tried to establish one in Santa Fe. Task Force felt like it was a more appropriate thing to go for the home run and the full scale of a statewide bank. And so we're going to hear from them about what progress they're making in getting a bill developed and if it's going to be ready for the 2021 legislative session. We'll get to Elaine and Melissa in just a moment. But first, a few reminders and announcements. Last week we had a solo last-minute cancellation, so we did a solo show or a duet, Roxanne and I, and we talked about the PRC election. We talked a little bit about the statewide election, and we definitely talked a bit about Donald Trump and his, at the time, last Saturday was when he was moved to the hospital. And so it's worth listening to. It was 30 minutes long. And we also injected some reasons for hope, I think. And given what's going on in the world today, a little bit of hope goes a long way. The week before that, I interviewed Maya Van Rossum. She's the founder of the Green Amendments for the Generations. We had Maya on back in May, but she came back to New Mexico this month and is still here and has been hard at work forging a coalition to get a bill to create a green amendment in New Mexico. And it was a great interview, a green amendment. You want to find out more about it. It would basically give you the right to clean air, clean water, and a clean environment. And that is a tool that, if it was in the Constitution, could be used to force regulators to do their jobs. You can watch all our past shows by going to retakeourdemocracy.org and hovering over the Actions and Events menu, and then click on Retake Conversations. And if you're driving around town right now and you can't listen to all of this interview, and it's going to be a good one, you can catch that. That'll be posted by Saturday morning, mid-morning. While you're at our website, I can't emphasize enough the importance of going to our election strategies and the toolkit we have prepared there. We really need all hands on deck right now. By the time this recording is on the air, we will have 24 days until the election. We're recording this on Monday, the Monday before it airs on Saturday. And so it's perfectly obvious that there's a lot of states in play, that while the polls look very good right now, they can switch in a heartbeat, as we learned in 2016. And so in particular, you can do the get out the vote strategy, which is very timely right now, in about 5 or 10 minutes. And you can, especially if you use it to reach out to people in other parts of the country, you can influence other races, because part of that get out the vote strategy is not just to encourage your friends who may live in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona, any of those states to vote, but it's also for them to write to 20 or 30 friends and encourage them to write to 20 or 30 friends. And in this way, you can have a cascading impact if you follow up with your friends. So please do this. We do not want to wake up on November 4th with regrets. If we wake up on November 4th with regrets, I can tell you one thing, Roxanne and I are out of here. And I know a lot of people who feel exactly the same way. So we've got to do everything we can right now make this election go the way it needs to go. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that on December 1st, we're going to have Peter Wirth and Brian Egolf, the Speaker of the House, on for a Zoominar. And that will be post-election, obviously. And importantly, they will have a very good handle on what's going on in terms of the election and what their caucuses look like. And so what what legislation we're going to have a good chance to get through. Finally, last week, Retake posted a really important blog. We did a lot of research. We worked closely with Norm Gaum, who's one of the foremost experts on water policy and water quality and water management in New Mexico. And it's a very, very important report on the kind of legislative and constitutional constraints under which the New Mexico must operate in order to try and address its water crisis, which is laid out in pretty frightening detail in that blog. So go to retakeourdemocracy.org, scroll down, you'll find it pretty quickly. And that's about as much as I think you need to hear from me today. We've got two guests who are in the wings, ready to chat it up. I do want to mention, actually, under the elections menu in Retake, we have our down ballot recommendations for several counties, Rio Arriba, Santa Fe, Doña Ana, Silver City, Bernalillo County, and Sandoval County and Taos. So all of those are captured in that down ballot recommendation. So that's enough for now. We've got a good deal to talk about. Hello, Elaine and Melissa. How are you both?
Hello.
Great. Hello. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, even if it is at this distance.
Yeah.
Life these days, huh? So I always like to let our guests introduce themselves. So how about if we start with you, Melissa? If you want to just tell us a bit about yourself and how you got involved in being an advocate for a state public bank.
Sure. Thank you. Well, my interest goes back a long time. In the first half of my career, I was a banker and had lots of really great education and understanding. And I learned a lot about my community being a banker at a community bank. And I was also very involved at a business level with initiatives to support local. So many years ago that was, and fast forward to a couple of years ago, and I met a woman, Helena Norberg Hodge, with an organization called Local Futures, and her work about local and the importance of supporting local and creating local economy and local life and getting out of the global world was so inspiring to me that it brought me forward in a way that I probably didn't understand years and years ago. And I found the Public Banking Initiative, and with my background in finance and all of my years of experience, the public bank made a lot of sense to me and what it could do for our state. Seeing where we'd come from back when I was involved in local and supporting local, we hadn't come very far, and in fact, we're in a worse situation. So the public bank to me makes a lot of sense as part of a system of what we need to put in place to move through these strange times that we're in.
Okay, thank you. Elaine, how about you?
Well, I've been an advocate of keeping our money local since the 1960s, when Walmart built a store in my hometown. And my dad was the only person I heard who was not excited. He said it will be the death of our downtown, and he was right. So if we fast forward then to the late 90s, I helped start the Santa Fe Small Business Alliance to help educate Santa Feans about the importance of our supporting local businesses and keeping our money circulating in our community to the greatest degree possible. So that's that's the background. In between, I was doing organizational consulting. I worked in the mental health world for a time. I worked in the corporate world for automatic data processing. I am highly motivated about this work that we're going to tell your listeners about for a couple of reasons. One is about the pandemic. The pandemic has highlighted that we must change the financial system in our state. The global banks are sucking the financial resources out of communities all over the US. And this is money that got generated here and that we need to thrive. But it goes to Wall Street, it gets invested in other parts of the world. It is not to our benefit. We've got to change that. And here's the ray of hope. We can change it. I think now is the time, we believe now is the time. We're not a poor state. We're a state that needs to manage and invest our money different from the way we've been doing it so that it benefits every New Mexican. And we can do this. The status quo is unacceptable and we can change it. We can dramatically change the future of our state, and our organization, the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity, is ready to help create that future.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Elaine, I got another question for you. You've been working on this as long as I've known about it. It was one of the first things Roxanne and I went to was the town hall or the seminar you had with Richard Wolf speaking. What year was that? Like 16, 15?
That was 14.
Ooh.
Fall of 2014. Time does fly, does it not?
Yeah, it does. But without getting too much in the weeds, can you just tell us what a public bank is and how it would benefit New Mexico?
Let me say a bit about that, and that'll just be throughout what all we want to talk about. There's a lot of information about what a public bank is on our website. So that I'm not going over things that some of your listeners already know, I encourage everybody to go to the website, www.aflep, A-F as in Frank, LEP.org. And there's frequently asked questions and just a lot of articles and information. In brief, for now, a public bank is a financial institution for managing and investing our public dollars, our taxes and our fees. It is not a place for individual bank accounts, which we encourage people to continue to use our community banks and credit unions for. A public bank is run by professional bankers, not by elected officials. That's a very important point. And I'd like to say a little bit about what it is by saying what a public bank can do. And I have a couple of stories. One goes back to 1997, and it highlights, as does the other story, it highlights the Public Bank of North Dakota, which is our stellar example about what is possible. In 1997, the Red River overflowed big time. The Red River separates North Dakota and Minnesota. And it overflowed on both sides. It devastated residents, business owners, farmers on both sides of the river. In North Dakota, the water created fires. The fire trucks couldn't get to the buildings that were burning. It was devastating. What happened in North Dakota is that the public bank was clear really fast that it was in the interests of the residents of North Dakota to invest in that devastated area so that the homeowners, the business owners, the farmers and ranchers could rebuild and stay there. They did that. They invested at reasonable rates so that people could rebuild, and they did. They lost about 3 or 4% of the tax-paying population at that time. Cross the river, and it's a very different story. In Minnesota, the big banks said, oh no, this is too risky an investment. We're not touching that. And so the area remained devastated, and they lost 17% of their tax-paying population because people could not rebuild. That's an example that the Public Bank of North Dakota has done multiple times at times of crisis, in particular, to support the state with the public dollars that got generated in that state in the first place. A very recent example that got highlighted in the Washington Post finance section in mid-May was about PPP relief being distributed. They were highlighting the Public Bank of North Dakota for the incredibly efficient and agile way that they distributed PPP relief checks to their communities. And what happened in North Dakota was that people got larger checks and they got them faster, and they went to the people who really needed them through the network that the public bank had with the local banks and credit unions. And it was not happening that way in the rest of the nation.
Those are good stories. They sure lay it out. I got one more for you, Elaine. Now that we have some idea of what a public bank is, can you fill us in on what AFLEP is and how advocacy began for the public bank here in New Mexico? And then we're going to move over to Melissa for a while.
What it is a statewide grassroots organization. Our largest amount of allies right now is still in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, but we have reached out from the north to the south, and our intention is that this be a vibrant statewide organization that both comes into being because we're all in it together, and it then benefits every New Mexican. We have gone from the symposium that you and I talked about that happened in the fall of 2014. 2 years prior to that, the late Craig Barnes, who was an inspiring leader for us, brought the idea and the impetus. He said, we have to interrupt the global banking system because it is not serving communities. And that's what we're about. So we are now in the spring of 2018, we became a statewide organization focused on statewide legislation. And that's where we're headed.
Okay. I'm sure you've seen it, but in today, this being Monday, the New Mexican had an article about the Pope's new proclamation of some sort. Roxanne told me about it. I haven't had time to read it yet, but it's basically calling out capitalism and saying, we can't keep doing business this way. And you'll want to take a look at it. There could be some seeds in there for something you might want to post on your page. So
just to add to what you just said, I read an article today that is titled, "Big Companies Are Starting to Swallow the World."
Yeah.
It's a big deal. We have to change that.
Yeah. So Melissa, AFLEP has been working towards forming a public bank for several years. Our economic, social, and health systems have been exposed as totally inadequate and dysfunctional by the circumstances of the past several months. How can a public bank become a critical player in regenerating the state's recovery and regenerating economies in local communities across New Mexico?
Sure. Well, the first thing to think about is why this is the time for the public bank. And I love what the Coalition of Sustainable Communities say. They say, like no other time in recent decades, the interconnected crises of COVID-19, injustice, and climate change have focused our attention on the actions required of elected officials, communities, and counties in New Mexico. So what that says to me is that one of the important components about a public bank is that looking at what COVID did, in New Mexico, there was a number of disparate loan programs, and it was very difficult for our small businesses to access the capital that they needed. In fact, even some of the CDFIs have told us that they missed the first round of funding because of the difficulty of accessing. And so putting a public bank, it's like a public bank if you think of bowling and you think of the bumpers that go down the line of bowling. The public bank are
for
like
those who use.
And for those who, well, you can see my skill and prowess in bowling. So the bumpers keep our ball from going off track. And the public bank is like the bumpers in that lane. It gives us a structure and a system that can align our financial system in a way that keeps us moving forward in, for example, some of the crises that Elaine outlined, that in the way the Bank of North Dakota has done. So it's a way and as a part of a system, because what we're really looking at here is a public bank being part of a system. I love what the governor of American Samoa said when they got their public bank established a few years ago. He said, "Today is a day our people will remember for a very, very long time, not because we dared to challenge the status quo or that we endeavored to find a banking solution for our people, our businesses, and our economy, but more so because the leaders of our territory have come together to find a common solution and an answer to the crippling challenges affecting the quality of life of the people of American Samoa." I feel in New Mexico, we are in this same situation, and the public bank gives us a way to come together and bring our systems and structures together to keep us on track. So that's a first thing to understand. We have a health emergency that's been engendered by the coronavirus. It's demonstrated how unhealthy our systems are. And we have conditions that are related to disease, unsustainable, anti-nature, unhealthy food systems that are all driving climate change. So the public bank will enable us to use our money and our creativity to change things significantly and turn things around towards a transformation that doesn't take us back to what normal was, or because we don't even really know what the new normal will be. It gives us a chance to explore, to ask questions. And you know, we tend to be a lot like airplanes. We want to take off. And this isn't a situation where taking off and putting Band-Aids on some kind of a fix will serve us in the long run. We need to look at this in a very carefully considered way. And the public bank gives that frame and that structure. But first we have to pass the legislation,
Right.
which we're going to be presenting the bill in this next upcoming session. And then we can begin to imagine all of the financial alternatives and how the public bank is one alternative and how we can all work together to really create the change we're trying to see.
Okay, I'm going to ask embellish on that just a little bit, but I have to just remind our listeners that they're listening to KSFR 101.1 FM, your local public radio station. And even though it's a week away from Pledge Week, you can get a heads up on or a head start on that by going to ksfr.org, clicking on the donate button, making a contribution, and viewing it as your ticket for admission to shows like this. Would really appreciate it. We're speaking with Elaine Sullivan and Melissa Pickett, two of the leaders of the effort to get us a state public bank in New Mexico. And Melissa was just telling us in some general terms how it could jumpstart our economy a bit. And I wonder if you could give us a specific example, Melissa. Like right now, our money is sitting in banks, and by our money, I mean like all kinds of retirement funds and tax funds and so forth. Billions of dollars are being managed for us by banks like Wells Fargo, making investments everywhere but New Mexico. If that money was in a public bank, could you give me a specific example? You got about 2 minutes, and then we're going to.
Sure, that money will create pathways to capital. In working through the community banking system and the credit union system. So for example, we have a toxic food system, and we need to make shifts and changes into a food system that better supports our health and well-being. And the public bank can be used to finance new innovation, can finance new farmer. The Bank of North Dakota has a number of innovative programs which they develop based upon where they want to direct their state to go. So we could, for example, make loans to new farmers, to regenerative agriculture. We could make loans to the businesses that will inevitably come about because of our shift to renewables, renewable energy. We can create strong communities, nutritious food systems, healthy environments through better access and more equitable access to capital. You have to know that there are more payday lenders in the state than fast food restaurants. And they often charge up to 450% interest. So we need the public bank in place to be able to respond and build our capacity for future pandemics, for renewable energy systems, to build strong local food systems, and to support the communities who have very difficult time accessing capital.
Okay, we'll talk more about that when the show will run over, as it often does, but I wanted to leave Elaine just about 3 minutes to wrap up in terms of how you can help support this effort. Go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you. We need the help. We need the help of your listeners. And I have 4 different categories. One is we want the not-for-profits, businesses, and individuals to publicly support this. And you can do that by going to our website and going to the supporter form, Support a Public Bank for New Mexico. Our experience from our California allies is that when they successfully went to the legislature and got legislation signed by the governor, it was very important that they had this long list of supportive endorsers and supporters so that they got the attention of their legislators. So that's really important. We need volunteers. This is a very big job. And I want to say to your listeners, it can be the most satisfying work that you do with your free time, because it really matters. It's worth the work. We need you to contact your legislators and other elected officials and ask them to pay attention to this and to be educated by it. And we need your financial support. It's very expensive to educate a full, diverse state about this alternative that will lift up the potential of our state and change us dramatically.
Okay, well, thank you for that. You did it in record time. You had a whole extra minute there. So I'm going to just let our listeners know that you've been listening to Retake Our Democracy and on KSFR. And for those of you driving around who want to hear more about what the public bank can do for New Mexico, we're going to continue this conversation in just a minute, and it will be available at retakeourdemocracy.org. Just hover over the actions and events page and click on Retake Conversations, and it'll be there by, if you're listening right now, it's almost 9. By 10 or 10:30, it should be on that site. And I also wanted to, again, encourage you to get into the election action, devote as much time as you possibly can. And again, our election strategy is available at retakeourdemocracy.org. Click on the elections menu, and all 4 of our strategies are right there. And then I finally, Melissa mentioned predatory lending. We're going to have Fred Nathan on the radio show next week. And we're going to be talking about predatory lending, as Think New Mexico has done a good deal of research on that topic. And it is a horrific situation. Actually, Melissa underplayed what rates used to be able to be charged. It was sometimes would go up to 1,000%, which is sort of mind-boggling. And so people who, like most of our listeners who are at least middle class, can access normal interest rates if they want to do an improvement in the house, if they need to get an engine reworked. But people who are poor don't have access to those loans, and so they get saddled with loans that can strap them in poverty for decades. While in 2019 they passed legislation that cut the rate to 175, Bill Soules had voted against it. Strong advocate for getting rid of predatory lending. He said, I just can't vote for 175. So we'll be going for 36 in 2021. So that's it for today. We'll be back next week again with Fred Nathan. Stay healthy, stay hopeful, and most of all, stay active. It's the only way we fix this mess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're back. And Melissa, you were telling us about, and we can be a little more informal now. You were talking a little bit about situations where a public bank, like right now, let's just say we were going to try and start a regenerative farm that was going to feed a school district in eastern New Mexico. And there was a community bank there, but they didn't quite have the leverage to make it happen, to enough money for the equipment that was needed to get them started and so forth. So isn't this where the public bank might step forward and provide some leverage to that community bank or credit union?
Yes, so that farmer would go to his community bank, and as you say, Paul, there might be either a little bit lack of capital, there might be just a little bit of a credit score, if you will, that doesn't quite allow that farmer to be credit qualified, but they're, a good solid person, and the bank would be inclined, the community bank could go to the public bank, and the public bank then could basically guarantee that loan. And in fact, the Bank of North Dakota has such a program where it would guarantee up to 80%. Even if a farmer had an idea for a transition plan for the business for their farm, they could take that plan into their bank. And if the public bank had a similar program to the Bank of North Dakota, there would be a beginning entrepreneur program whereby that farmer could get a loan based upon their business plan, and then the bank would loan up to 85% if it looked like a viable deal. So there are a lot of creative ways. The Bank of North Dakota is known for its agility. So what that means that they are able to put into place loan programs that can directly support what the needs are of the community. And that's what makes one of the reasons why the public banking initiative is so exciting, because it can address so much. That beginning farmer, the biological breakdown that we're in, the supporting alternative sources of energy as an example.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't mentioned about diversifying our economy out and away from oil and gas dependency.
Yeah, we need to do
So
that.
and even, we heard of a situation where there was a coffee shop in one of our communities, and they'd been around for a number of years, and they wanted a business expansion loan just to add some space. And they went to their local bank, and they were not successful in getting that loan. So in that situation, a public bank could step in and make that small loan. In this case, it was $10,000. And the large banks don't want to make those small loans, those micro loans, because there's not enough profit, if you will, involved with that. In the situation with the community bank, they are mission driven. They are not beholden to shareholders. And they're mission driven. And what is the mission? The mission would be what we as New Mexico residents would say to our legislators, this is important to me. We want to develop the potential of New Mexico. There's so much potential here. This is why I feel so hopeful, because we in New Mexico, we ought to be the clean energy center for the country in solar, wind, and geothermal. So that's an example of potential that the public bank could finance in solar, in community solar development. Another example, we could be the solar hub. It was really interesting. I just read about this company called Anu, who they're in the southern part of the state. They installed a solar technology it's a vertical polygon solar technology. And it made the Los Lunas village the first municipality in the country to install it. So that's just an example of how public bank financing could accelerate the deployment of solar energy here, small business innovation, and support those microloans and give access to capital in ways that it's just not available right now.
All right. A question for you, Melissa, and although anybody can dive in, all that you've said is really tremendous. So good, in fact, that it does cause one to wonder why it is so difficult to get a public bank passed. I know that there are barriers. What is simmering in other states, and what are some of the barriers that keep us from getting a public bank in New Mexico?
Well, the first thing to understand is that there is a lot happening all across the country at this time. There are, as you know, California just passed public banking legislation, but between bills and feasibility studies, task force looking at a public bank, legislation that has been passed, organized groups across the country that are working to get public banks established. There's a lot happening. And of course, we know that there are public banks all over the world already, in the United Kingdom, in Russia, in Portugal, in Mexico, in Norway, in Chile, Costa Rica, France, and of course, we all know about the Sparkasse in Germany. So public banks have been around a long time. In our situation in the United States, I think that what we've been dealing with is an entrenchment of the status quo. And it's very, very difficult to shift the status quo in a way that causes true substantial change to happen. And I feel like once we all really come together and understand that the public bank is for everyone, and it's a way that we can take our money back from Wall Street, build strong local food systems, adopt regenerative agriculture, clean water, clean air. It's a matter of understanding and really seeing that the time is now, especially on top of with COVID and the insufficient systems and structures that are falling apart. Infrastructure is another example where the public bank could step in and support infrastructure development.
The other thing that gets supported by this business model is our local financial institutions. And I want to just emphasize that because there's some confusion about whether this would be competitive. It is not a competitive model. The example that we get from the Bank of North Dakota is the partnership of the public bank with the other local financial institutions, the credit unions and the community banks. And it is that network, that collaborative network, that enabled the Bank of North Dakota to do that effective dissemination of PPP relief checks. It also provides communities with thriving community banks and credit unions. We are losing our community banks, as is true for almost every state in the nation except North Dakota. In the last decade, North Dakota added 6 new community banks, and that's unreal given the experience in the rest of the nation. And the credit goes to the partnership that's been created between the public bank and those community banks in the way that Melissa demonstrated with her example. and it allows those community banks and credit unions to increase their lending capacity. They get new customers, and there is a thriving system. Everybody wins except Wall Street.
Mhm. And we have to understand the incredible lobbying and power and potency of the Wall Street banks. And basically, 4 large banks own now almost 50% of banking assets. It's an incredible, powerful lobby.
Yeah, and they don't want to see anything like this, even if in a little tiny state like New Mexico, because word gets out that it's working, and then it's not just North Dakota that they can have to deal with. So we certainly hope this this works. I know that you've been, Melissa, this is for you. Elaine really answered my question about what's going on with the community banks and the credit unions. But if you have more to add to that, Elaine, you can do it after we talk to Melissa for a second on this one. But I know you're the outreach coordinator, so you're probably on Zooms all day long trying to get people to find out more about the public bank and why they should support it. So how's that effort going?
It's going really well. We're working through bringing on organizations as supporters. We're hopeful to have the bill. The bill is being worked on right now, and we're hopeful to have the first bill coming out within the next couple of weeks. And once we have the bill, we'll be asking people to endorse that bill. Right now, we're asking people who are interested and believe and support this initiative to come online, go to our website, and sign up as a supporter, because we're wanting to develop a very, very long list of supporters. And then we'd like our supporters to turn into endorsers for this bill. And we thank Retake Our Democracy for being an endorser, as well as the Healthy
It was a
Soil.
really hard decision.
Yeah.
You did well by that.
Yeah, it was a narrow vote. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. So we really are outreaching outside the Rio Grande corridor. So we are looking for organizations in communities, Farmington, Gallup, the north and northeastern part of our state, the rural areas who can greatly benefit from the public bank. So we're looking for organizations, businesses who will support the public bank, so that we have a unified voice as we go into this next legislative session. So we're in a full-on push doing that right now.
Well, we know folks in different parts of the state from we did a couple of road trips throughout the state to talk with people in the east and the south and the north and in western New Mexico and Gallup. So if you want some e-introductions, I'd be happy to do that. We could talk about it after we get off.
Absolutely, that would be terrific, Paul.
Okay, so last question before we let it go, close for the day. Can you tell us again where people can get more information and how they can help?
Yes. www.aflep.org is the website. AF as in Frank, LEP stands for Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity. Please go to the website and please sign up for our database. We're sending out e-blasts once every 2 weeks, and it will be a lot of new information about what's going on in New Mexico, what supportive information there is about what's going on in other states, and articles increasingly being written. I think the pandemic has heightened awareness of all the brokenness of our current financial system. And so the motivation and the excitement about the possibility for alternatives has grown. We need the help of your listeners. One, as Melissa just said, to be supporters, go to our website, sign up as a supporter so that our legislators see that we're at their backs. This is really important because we're asking them to do something different. We are asking them to step outside the status quo because the status quo is unacceptable. And it is, the status quo is the reason that we have a high rate of poverty, and we have the quality of education that we struggle with, and we have the food insecurity that is terrible in New Mexico. All of those things have resulted from the status quo. We have to change it, but we have to let our legislators know that we expect that. So please, please, we need volunteers to help us reach out to all those communities around the state that you, Paul, and you, Melissa, have been talking about. And as I said in the earlier segment, this can be incredibly satisfying work because it's not Band-Aid work. This is about dramatic change that could impact the future of New Mexico for a very long time. Please join us. Contact your legislators and other elected officials and tell them this is happening and that you want them to get informed about it and you hope they will support it. And we need your financial support in addition.
Yeah, and we'll put the link in when, you know, we always promote the radio show the Thursday or Friday before and the Monday after. And so we'll have a little link in there to AFLEP so that they can make the contributions or get sign up as a supporter. And thank you both for being with us today. Good luck with the campaign. Keep me informed. Let me know when you got that bill in your hot little hands. And we'll talk offline about how ways we can maybe connect you with some folks in some other parts of the state. And that's all for today. We'll be back next week with Fred and Nathan, and we'll be talking about predatory lending in New Mexico and what we can do to get rid of it, which is something that's long overdue. And just one last encouragement. By the time you hear this, we'll be 24, I think, days away from the election. That's not too late for you to play a big role. And Retake has 4 strategies that you can employ in order to get active, and that's at retakeourdemocracy.org in the elections menu. So stay healthy, stay hopeful, stay active. It's the only way we fix this mess. Thanks a lot. We'll be back next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.